Okay, good morning. We're on page 86 in Hemshech Tzadik Daled, which is equivalent to 5694, which parallels and is based on and explains where we are in Ayin Beis, volume 2, which is, of course, this class is an Ayin Beis class, page 1149, 1150, bottom of 1149, 1150. So we covered yesterday was continuing the discussion of the leap of the tzimtzum. That's what he calls it, a leap. Derech dilug, kfitza, a leap, which is shalei b'hadraga. It's not a progressive flow from one state to another, which he says like cause and effect. Ilav v'olol, that's one of the two ways things are transmitted, cause, effect, and it flows in a progressive, orderly, staged fashion. There's a second form of transmission, hamshacha, which he calls shalei b'hadraga. The first is seder shtalshlus, the second, and the first one, the outer, chesheni sa'elyon, the outer of a higher level becomes the inner of a lower level. The second is hamshacha shalei b'hadraga klal. It's not at all in any orderly step-by-step progression. And that's what allows for a metamorphosis into a new reality to emerge. In our case, we're talking about how to get to ischalkus from a state of utter bligvul, an utter shapeless and seamless infinitude or endless flow pre-tzimtzum, to get to a state of ribuy ischalkus, that the earth itself will break down into structured levels. And the example he gave for this was the difference between walking and leaping. When you walk, even when you walk quickly, one foot is on the ground, even when the other foot is up in the air, except you don't see it because it's very quick. When a person leaps, however, they're like pareich ba'avir. There's a point where their entire body and both legs are above the ground, and there's actually a space between them and the ground. So they've left that state of being ground-based. Now the mashal, as I said, is not in all details, because when you leap above the ground, but then you come back to the ground, the same ground. But in the ruchnius part, the analogy is meant to say that we have to uproot ourselves from a previous state in order to, the leap is uprooting from a previous state to get to a new state. In the nimshal, in the moral, the Erein Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum is like the ground. That's the status quo. The state of consciousness there is all divine. It is the pause of the tzimtzum that stops that consciousness from flowing into the space left. This space that's like is through the leap, and that's what allows that when it comes back, when you get back to when light will return after this leap, it will be a different type of light, a light that is able to relate to another reality besides pure bligvul divine consciousness pre-tzimtzum. That's the only aspect of the mashal that works here. If you start trying to dissect, what about because I said in a leap, in a regular sprinter, the sprint just makes them go faster and they can jump over the ground. But in ruchnius, it's a qualitative shift. And the point is that it shouldn't have it's not anchored any longer. And it's not attached to that state that was there before. That's what a leap is about. So the mashal is about defining what leap means, a true leap. So in human context, in psychological context, if a person's going to grow into a new place, real chidush, we say, a person grows into being a new person. Rosh Hashanah coming, a newness. Newness means that you're not still attached to something yesterday. If, for example, if you're holding on to some grudge and you got rid of 99% of it, but you still have 1% of it, you're still connected to it. So the past is still shaping your future. True release and freeing yourself and letting go is letting go entirely. That's what a leap is. In a way, when we speak about the Rebbe Marash's statement, L'chatchila riber, that's what it means. L'chatchila riber is a type of leap. He says, the Welt sagt, if you can't go under, you go above. And I say you initially go above. Above, it's not, I'm not going to say the L'chatchila riber is exactly this and in every context, but it has a similar concept that you're not going step by step. And when you have no choice, you go above, you do a little leap. Here, the whole approach is one where you're not bound by yesterday's behavior. That's really what Oretz here is. You're not attached to whatever was there a moment before. You're able to free yourself. You're able to go into a new space. When Avram Avinu becomes from Avraham, it wasn't just a new stage of growth. He became a new human being, not bound by instagninus, by the signs, astrological signs, not bound by the same natural forces in life. It was a whole new attitude. Matan Torah was a chidush. It wasn't just more gilui elokus. Something qualitatively shifted. There was a leap. So leap here is really, in a broad sense of the word, can be used for any place where there's a real shift, a paradigm shift from one state to another. If it's still an extension of before, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's still basically that ongoing flow. It's a different state. Tzimtzum required for existence to emerge in a way that we can understand. Tzimtzum is the key because it creates that leap and shift of one consciousness to allow for another consciousness to emerge. That's the general key thing you keep in mind. Just one more second. I was thinking about the example because usually an example in Chassidus is more intricate. Here, it's interesting. He uses the word, the leap. That's why I'm elaborating, because usually an example has a lot more things in common. Here, the only thing in common is that that the leap, when the person's leaping, is not connected to what you were. It's like when the Rebbe demanded and asked for people to go on shlichus. It was a shift of consciousness, because initially everybody thought, I grew up in my community, in my city, I'll be a good frum Jew, a Yireh Shamayim, a Chassidish Jew, follow the Rebbe's guidelines, but to take myself, leave my home, lech lecha, ma'artzecha, ma'melatzecha, ma'beis avicha, leave my comforts, leave even the good things, and go to a barren wilderness where there's no mikveh, there's no shul, there's no friends, there's no Jewish and Torah environment, that is a leap. Now, obviously, we went with the koyach of the Rebbe, but that's a real leap because there's nothing in common. And that was demanded. When the neshama comes down below, it's a leap, because the neshama l'mayla is a completely different reality. Only ruchnius, learns Torah all day. There's no issues of health, of corruption, of money, of pain. It all doesn't exist. That's why neshama al korcha chatachai, neshama doesn't want to come down. The kavanah is to come, but from a point of view of pleasantness, nuach la'adam shalei nivra misha nivra is what Shammai holds, and the halach is that way. And the Alter Rebbe says nuach. It's more pleasant to remain in Gan Eden and Ruchnis than be born, but it's not more meaningful. So the purpose is dafka to come through a leap. The tzimtzum is not exactly pleasant. It's quite painful, actually, a shift where one day you are completely basking in divine light, and now suddenly you have to contend with the concealment and all that it brings. I mean, I wouldn't say basking because we weren't there pre-tzimtzum using that statement, but you get the idea. So, but purposeful, that's exactly the kavanah. And it will bring out the deepest, which we're going to talk about, and we've talked about as well. So that's the example, the leap in running and walking. Maybe that's why God made that example. So we have something to visualize. When you really want to get far, when you really want to get beyond where you are, you need to leap. You cannot say, okay, I'm going to hold on to my past just in case. That there has to be a certain leap, a certain jump. I want to share a story that I'll share about myself, but Eliezer wants to ask something. Go ahead.
Yeah, two things. One is that, but don't we learn that in truth, after the radical symptom, Halama Kampane is really still filled with the Oriental symptom. It's just concealed from us. That there was a shift, but it was always still there. It was never a place void of that light of God. And that's the first question. So, seems quite to that, if that's true, then there wasn't really a leak. There was concealment, but on certain perspectives, but it still remained attached to the ground. So that's my first question. The second question is, if we're going to do that leap to go back up, and what you say is the whole purpose of Ayin Beis is to climb back up that ladder to get as high as we can to have a deep, profound, intimate relationship with God. As a mountain climber, who as a mountain climber in the right mind is going to leap? I mean, it's my understanding that I've never done a mountain climber, but they go step by step with those, things in the rock, and that leaping is not part of the vernacular, it's part of the exercise. So how are we going to do that leap up there? It's dangerous or whatever. I mean, it's not done in mountain.
Okay, well, the response to your first question. So first of all, 2 points I would make. Number one is, what it says in Chassidus is that from the point of view of the teacher doesn't lose his brilliance because he's mitzamtzim himself. But from the point of view of the student, there's absolutely no revelation at all. So it is a tremendous leap. It's a complete pause. It's complete silence. And that's exactly the point. So you're talking about from the godly perspective, the energy remains intact, but now there's an area. It's not physical, but conceptually there's a space that allows for another consciousness to emerge, which is the student, who's completely oblivious and is in a real way has no access, ostensibly, to that pre-tzimtzum awareness and consciousness. That's a fact. That's not an illusion. We are not aware of godliness in this reality unless we work on it. That's what the tzimtzum does. So the tzimtzum is a very real tzimtzum. It's just that the teacher, his brilliance, he doesn't become less brilliant, but he's not expressing it. So from the world of expression, there's a real shift. The etzem, Eined Mulvade always remains a reality. From Atzmus, there's altogether nothing to talk about. But remember, Atzmus is not subject not to reveal and not to conceal. So Atzmus is not on the table here. Even the Eid Ein Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum, which is a state of expressed consciousness, but its consciousness is only limited to itself, and it's not expressed to another. So that is where the Tzimtzum comes into play, that the other can emerge. And as such, it's a complete concealment. He said, B'derech siluk, not miut, it's not diminished, it's as if it's removed. What we mean is utterly concealed. And the context of the leap, it's a complete leap. God's consciousness, and the best sign of it is the pain that God has when the son stops looking for him. When the Holocaust happened, the Holocaust happens in the Chol L'Mokum Pani, not in Eir Ein Sof. So that's not an illusion. That caused tremendous tragedy. The tzimtzum is not the tragedy. The tzimtzum allows for independent individuals to go ahead and kill each other and kill innocent people. I just want to show you the consequences of this. It's not a small little matter. How's that even possible? It's possible because another consciousness has emerged. And if you let it go without the control, it could end up causing the worst possible nightmares and harm in this universe. To the point that Eir Ein Sof itself cries, and Shchinta Begalusa and all of that. So that's the answer to question number one.
But if I may ask that, the Dilu means that it jumped from a previous existence to another existence. The giving room to the other, which is us in creation, after the symptom, we didn't exist in the previous in the Lithia symptom. So there was no Dilu for us. We're not transforming.
It's not a tzimtzum for us. It's the reality. Our reality is defined by the tzimtzum. I
But
didn't
there's
say
no,
it's a symptom for us. It's a reality. Then our reality would not exist without the symptom. So it's more than, it's not just a symptom for us. Symptom for us would mean we're there and then we get less revelation. There's nothing. There nothing exists. The symptom is a fundamental shift in the divine consciousness, allowing for another consciousness to emerge. So if you say the pre-symptom consciousness would be the ground, the
yes.
leap would be leaving that ground and leaving now a space for another reality. It's the leap the other way around. It's a leap from a complete divine consciousness being the only reality and now allowing room for another reality. That's the leap.
So the leap is allowing for another reality, but it's by,
Another consciousness, if you wish.
but the leap is by or itself. It's not by us, right? It's not by the
There is no
creation.
us.
Right. So it's, I mean, so the leap is by or itself. So
That's the symptom. The symptom, it says that Erein Sof Mamala Kolam Etzias and
Yeah.
Simsum Atzmai. The Abishta concealed it now.
Mhm.
So the exists in its place, but it doesn't exist in this place.
So the leap is from Shitas, Litnei symptom, to a condition, a position of now allowing for another otherness, so to speak. And that's the leap that Orion Sof did. God did to his Orion Sof after the pre-symptom and after the allowing for space for another person, another creation. Would that be correct?
That's exactly what I've been saying.
Okay. Now the second thing about the mountain climbing.
The second question is a very straightforward answer. You introduced the mountain here. Doesn't say anywhere mountain in this mimer. So you're using an example and you're asking a question on your example. So I would not use mountain here because you're right. With a mountain, you don't have a leap. So I wouldn't use mountain. I would just use stages. A person is climbing. At times you climb step by step. And at times you go more than one step at a time. You go 5 steps at a time. For example, the general avodah throughout the year is step by step. Comes Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, we have the ability to take a leap and go into a new state. It's like tshuva, more than tzaddik. A tzaddik goes step by step, and a Baal tshuva makes a leap, transforms their lives. So in the analogy, I would say the analogy is either you're going walking step by step or you're leaping. I don't know if you bring the mountain into here. You're right, on a physical mountain, but you don't ask questions on a mushal. You ask questions on a nimshal. You can't bring a mushal and then say, I have a question on the mushal. The mushal does not apply when it comes to leap because you can't leap on a mountain. Now, if you really want to push it, you could say maybe mountain climbers at times, they see there's a ledge, they go to the next ledge, but maybe there are times they're able to or capable of having to take a leap because there's no ledge in sight, if you really want to force it. But I don't like to force mashalim that are not necessary. But if you need the muscle of the mountain. So I would look at it more that there's different ways of, there's avodah b'seder v'hadraga. It's not the first time we've learned this. Al pitam v'das. You go from one level to another level to another level. Generally, tshuva is used as an expression, b'shaita chada, b'riga chada, because tshuva means that a person, let's talk of has hit rock bottom, and the only way out is to take a complete leap. I'm going to change my life, type of thing. But generally in Torah, we're not asked to change our lives. We're asked to go step by step. And even if you do take a leap from time to time, even that has to be integrated into our systems. That's why leaping is a temporary or only a sporadic experience. The true avodah is a step-by-step one, generally speaking. But there are times where we need a leap. Look, after the Tzimtzum Arishan, there are going to be many, many gradations, but it's all going to be b'derech miyut, step by step, rather than seder shtalshus, rather than a leap. But when you need a paradigm shift, you need to have a leap. You cannot solve a problem from the system that it was created in. So you need to go into a new state, a new way of thinking. You know, when people, so very often there are things that we go in order, like I mentioned Rabbi Zera, from Talmud Bavli to Talmud Yerushalmi. But in Talmud Yerushalmi itself, or Talmud Bavli, there's also plenty of growth. However, there you don't necessarily need a full leap. So it's case by case. I mean, it's hard to tell you exactly where and when. Every person in their life sometimes needs a leap. And then there's where you travel regularly. So you need both in life.
So if I may ask, consider supply, do you believe that in order to bring the gula, like the Rebbe wants all of us to do everything we can do to bring the gula, we can do it step by step, or that is something that would absolutely require a leap?
In Shari Eira from the Mittler Rebbe, he discusses this at length. It's based on a Gemara. The Gemara says, Be'ita achishena. Mashiach will come Be'ita in his time, and achishena meaning before his time, faster. So the Gemara asks, which one is it? Is it in its time, which means step by step, or achishena? Is it a leap? Something will accelerate it. And the Gemara answers, Zachu and Loi Zachu. If we merit Zachu achishena, meaning if people do what they have to do, it can come faster. If not, it'll come more step by step. The Rebbe explains that today, if Mashiach would have come after Yetzias Mitzrayim, or after if Adam and Chava did not eat from the tree of knowledge, that would have been achishena. That would have been a major leap. But that would have been because they did what they had to do. So God allowed a leap. But the downside of a leap is it's not internalized. It's not bitter pnimi. So today, the Rebbe explains, we have both. We've gone through thousands of years of step-by-step, hard avodah, hard-earned, besidus nefesh, of every possible way. We've refined we've done so much. So to say this is a leap, it's not a leap anymore. It's a step-by-step birurim, and we've come to the point where the birurim are finished, as the Rebbe explains, because Jews are everywhere, the whole world has been reached, at least in space, not every fiber of existence, but in general. So we've gone through this step-by-step, but always there's an element of a leap, because let's be honest, as the Rebbe once said in the Farbrengen, that Mashiach is so not part of our reality, we're so accustomed psychologically to this state that even if someone were to tell you Mashiach came right now, we'd all be shocked. Why would we be shocked? We've been hearing about it because our emotional state, our minds may not be shocked, but our emotions would be, because we're so not expecting it. That's why it says Mashiach ba behesach hadas. What means behesach hadas? We talk about it all the time. The Rebbe wants us to talk about it. We want Mashiach now. We say it 6-7 times in Shemoneh Esrei. We learn Geula Mashiach. What does it mean? Hes Chadas. Hes Chadas, the Gemara compares it to finding a lost item. That out of the blue, you suddenly, Hes Chadas. So Chassidus explains, and the Rebbe explains, because as much as we're talking about it, it still will startle us. It'll be a leap, because, wow, it really happened? I can't believe it. We'll say that. Because our state of mind, I remember the Rebbe once saying in a Farbrengen, what do you expect of Jews? If you lived when the Beis Hamikdash stood, and then you saw it destroyed, you could say, I miss it, because I saw it. But once you were born in Golus, and you never saw the light, you never experienced what Gilui Elokus really is. So we could talk about it, and we learn about it, and we can aspire to it, and we try to, as much as possible, live it, but it's still not natural, because we never lived there. We never experienced it firsthand. It's Elokus b'Ischachus. That's why it's a leap. So basically, my answer is, it's a combination, that the steps have been done, but there's still going to be a leap which we need to do, and especially now, like we always say, insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. So if we keep going step by step and saying, okay, tomorrow, we definitely need to do something radical. So my answer is basically, the step-by-steps have been done. Now let's finally do something to take it to another level. That's my general answer to that.
Thank you so much.
Okay, good. Now the Frierdiker Rebbe, and again, taking the cue from Ayin Beis, we're talking about page 942. I know I've said we're in 1149, 1150, but remember, the beginning of Ayin Beis, at least the sugya in Ayin Beis that we're learning is about transforming the tzimtzum. So now the Rebbe Rashab referred to the Maimer Vayhi Ha'onan, a Pesach Maimer, which is pages 11, what did I say yesterday? 938 through 942. So there he talks more details, and the Frierdiker Rebbe felt the need to actually cite that Ayin Beis. So all this about the leap.
Tell a story.
Oh yeah, I was going to share a story. Good. It's a personal story that captures a bit this leap idea. I think I may have mentioned it. When I was a kid, summer bungalow colony. So I was a relatively fine swimmer, but then I decided I want to learn how to dive. To dive into the pool. Now it shouldn't be a big difficult thing, right? You get up on a diving board and you just dive in. But I had this terror. I was terrified. Not because I was afraid of water. I knew how to swim. I was able to be in water all the time. But I was terrified to take the leap from the diving board. Okay. After a few tries, I decided, you know what? Maybe I'll leap, not from the diving board. I'll go to the edge of the pool. Fine. Same fear. I could not bring myself to leap. I remember it vividly. I remember what year. It was in Adler's bungalow colony. And I was going crazy. And you know how you are when you start with the delays, you start counting down. Okay, tomorrow morning, right after davening, right after breakfast and everything, I'm going to go get in a bathing suit. And I got there, all excited. I start counting down. I'll count from 10 to 1, 10, 9, 8. No, I'll count from 100 to 1. Then I'll count from 1,000 to 1. You know how there's all kinds of little tricks your mind plays with you. And I just could not bring myself to leap. It was ridiculous. Then I said, okay, tomorrow's another day. Another day. Finally, I said, you know what? Let me, and I couldn't explain it because what was I afraid of? So I said, I know how to be in the water. What was I afraid of? That my stomach is going to burst up. There's a belly flop and your stomach bursts open and all your breakfast comes running out. So I decided, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to sit at the edge of the pool and I'll just let myself drop in. Even that was afraid. Anyway, I don't want to make a long story short. This took I think 2 summers, maybe 1 summer. I don't remember now. Anyway, I was sitting there trying this just to drop in, and a guy came over that I didn't notice, and he just pushed me in. So I fell into the water, and that was it. The fear left. After that, I learned how to dive, and I dived from the edge, from the diving board. And I always wondered, what was this? And when I learned the Chassidus that there's an ayin be'emtza between yesh and yesh, and there's a need for a leap, there's maybe a psychological fear. It's my only theory. It's my theory. I may be wrong. That standing on the ground, I know how to do. Swimming in the water, I also know how to do. But that in between, even though it's a split second, where I'm not on the ground and I'm not in the water, like where am I? That suspension, that I'm not here. So like you lose your security. I don't have my house, but I don't have my new house. I don't have my old house. I don't have my new one. I just like let everything go. And maybe that triggered a certain fear because you don't know this area in between, which is like the leap into free space. Obviously, your seichel tells you you're going to end up in the water, but emotionally, that was my take. So psychologically speaking, a leap can be a little terrifying because when you have 1 foot here and 1 foot here, fine. Basically, you're safe. But if someone says, we want you to jump now, going to jump from one rooftop to another rooftop, that's not so pashut. There's a big space in between. Now, you may be able to leap, but there's a certain emotional fear because you're not here and not there. And that shift of going from one state to another can have that type of element. Obviously, it's commensurate to the growth because when you do it, you actually come to a new place of understanding something. But you need to let go. And that, I think everybody in life is going to have times where there's a need to not just walk slowly or even walk quickly, but to take a leap. That was what I wanted to share. A little more personalizing this.
I think the lesson there is that ultimately you needed a second person to push.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Moshe Rabbeinu,
I don't know. I'd still be sitting there.
it is Kohen, it's a partnership. I think the person needs a partner to do the pushing.
I agree. One of my main things when I give people advice is find somebody that you invite to kick you in the pants. Because if you don't have it, sometimes you just stay stuck. It's true. I think it's one of the greatest gifts is to have a good friend that you trust, and say, listen, if you see me procrastinating, make sure you push me. Not obviously not in an aggressive, hurtful way, but sometimes we need it. We need that pressure. In a cholzu, the Rebbe brings a cholzu that when you make a decision and you do it with another person, it makes it a lot easier because you're, in a sense, responsible. You know? Would I be learning Ayin Beis every day, regularly, on my own, with the discipline, if there aren't other people that are waiting and depending and we're all connected? That's the power of chavrusa, or a group, and a shir. I think it's a tremendous force because it gets rid of that element of laziness or procrastination or whatever it is, that resistance to commitment or to shifts and changes.
Maybe that's
Look,
part of the reason the Rebbe asked people to learn in Yoni Gul Mashiach with a minyan, 10 people, and Barabbim. And that gives it the other extra chizuk for all of us.
Yeah. Look, that's why it's so amazing when you see the Rebbe generating, no matter what age he was, constantly new campaigns and ideas. That doesn't happen commonly because you need to really be a person who's constantly looking for the leap, not just a little more of. And that's of really thinking like a revolutionary, like a pioneer, you know. I mean, I think that's why the Rebbe was so pained and so emotional in many ways, Kav Yochel, Chav Ches Nissen, when he said everything I did, the words he used, because his standard, his expectation, his sights were set for the goal line. Don't tell me I brought the ball right near the goal and it didn't go in. That's not consoling to me. I want to go cross the finish line. And when someone has that type of determined, relentless pursuit, almost obsession, then it's not enough to say 99% of the goal was reached. We want Mashiach b'poel mamish. So you understand that when someone is thinking he wants alakus b'pshitis, you tell me that we're almost there, or we're halfway there, or 90%. I want alakus b'pshitis, and you cry for it. You know, when the Rebbe spoke with Chav Cheshvan, often he would almost every year the story that the Rebbe Rashab cried why God doesn't reveal himself to him. You know, the Pasha Vayera, he was crying. He went to the Tzemach Tzedek. He was 4 or 5 years old. And I remember the Rebbe explaining, forget about the answer. The answer was, he's a tzaddik, 99 years, 100 years, decides to circumcise himself. He deserves. But the Rebbe, the question itself, that a child should cry, for what? What is he crying for? He's not in pain. He's not missing money. He's not missing anything. He just is crying because he doesn't see Elokus. So that type of, when you have that view, that's called a leap, a vision. You know, I don't just want a little more. Okay, make my life a little easier so I can do a mitzvah. That's nice, but it's a whole different state. But the Rebbe, as he once told somebody in Yechidus, Golus, he says, a machla. It's an illness. When it comes to someone asks the Rebbe, why is he so passionate and so adamant? The Rebbe says it's an illness. Just because you don't feel it's an illness doesn't mean it's not. When it's an illness, you cry. You cry out. You're not complacent and say, okay, maybe tomorrow. No, I want the healing now. So if you see Golus as an illness, in the sense Elikus is not Begoli, not even talking about death, tragedy, loss, and all the pains of Golus. The mere fact that Elikus is not Begoli, even when everything is going well. That is radical thinking. What should I say? Okay. Let's move on here. Well, we're moving on further. Okay, so now in this in the Ayin Beis, page 941, the Frierdiker Rebbe is going to quote further. He's going to bring now a new mashal. This mashal, remember, until now we learned about the leap.
He said just now, Adin Steinzel just passed away. He said the Rebbe is not sleeping because the Chassidim are sleeping.
Okay. I think even if the Chassidim were awake, the Rebbe would also not be sleeping, but I understand.
He said, look in technology. What kind of a change happened in half a year? So what, we have good Chassidim, finer Yidden, but the Rebbe wants, like you said now.
Okay, yeah. Yeah. There was I once heard the Frierdiker Rebbe when they blew shofar Rosh Hashanah. So in the later years in the shins, the 40s, Frierdiker Rebbe didn't blow shofar, but he made the bracha. He would be there were the Frierdiker Rebbe's bchias, his tears, you could hear all the way down to Eastern Parkway from the second floor. It was so he was sobbing with such intensity. That's was known Rosh Hashanah. There was once a guest, a Balabatish guest. I think he was a Yek. I think he was a German Jew, German roots, and he was there in the room when the Frierdiker Rebbe was crying. So he turned to somebody and said, "Why is he crying? He has a beautiful wife, beautiful children. Look, Chassidim, beautiful shul, people. He has everything that one would want. Why is he crying?" So how do you explain that? So there was the Chassid Harav, what was his name? Axelrod from Baltimore. Not Shmuel. Shmuel? No. He was a Chassid of a Chabad Chassid. He came from the Lubavitch. He learned that he was in Tem Chetmim, a real Tomim. And they learned in Lubavitch that you first night Rosh Hashanah, you daven long with a lot of bchias, a lot of tears. That was the way Chassidim davened the first night Rosh Hashanah. Rabbi Axelrod was a very Gehebeneid. I met people who knew him. Anyone who saw him, he was like of a different reality. A person who lived and breathed Chassidus. They say he never lifted his eyes above the level of eye level of a person. He never looked. That's how he was disciplined. He came to Baltimore in, I think not in the 20s maybe. The 20s would have been what? The Pays, or the early 30s. Not sure which one. But he came to Baltimore, and he was a relic from a different reality. He got a stella in a Baltimore shul. I heard the story from people from the community. The first Rosh Hashanah that he's the rabbi, you have to hear this. It's a mind block. The first Rosh Hashanah, so they're davening, and he's the Rav. He's up there up front, and he's the minyan finishes, and he continues. So some of the Balabatim felt, out of respect, they want to walk the first Rosh Hashanah, the new rabbi. They'll walk him home, so they'll wait a few minutes. They wait 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, half hour, and he's crying like a baby. They have no clue. They're looking at each other. Why is he crying? What's the matter? Well, finally, I think they didn't even wait because he davened so long they couldn't wait any longer. Then they met with each other and they said, "Why is he crying? His wife is well." So they checked. Yes, she's fine. His children, his life, everything seems to be well. So someone said, maybe we didn't offer him enough money. Maybe he feels that his salary is too low. So he's crying to God to bless him with more parnasa. This is what they thought. So after Rosh Hashanah, they called him in, the board, and they said, we really respect you, and we want to give you a raise. He says, "What do you mean? You just hired me. We already agreed." They said, "No, we feel that you deserve more. And we saw also you were sad, Rosh Hashanah." He looked at them and said, "I'm very happy. I'm happy with my stella here. I'm happy with my salary." And they could not for the life of them understand why he was crying. So he wrote back a letter to the Chassidim in wherever they, at that point, was in, wherever they were, maybe at Fosk, I'm not sure, it depends when it was. He said, "I'm living with people who are beautiful Jews, but they can't understand why I would cry Rosh Hashanah." My point is, this is called a different paradigm, a different reality. I can go on and tell you some other good stories of this nature, but I think you know what I'm talking about. I just found it very...
Rabbi, his name was Rabbi Avram Eliyahu.
Oh, Avram Eliyahu Axelrod, yeah. Extraordinary person. I have to share this. I was on a Pesach program last year or 2 years ago, and there was a guy from Baltimore, an old man, a Veltashid, comes over to me. We were talking, and he said to me, I had seen Rav Axelrod when I was a child. And he starts sharing with me. He says I said, "So tell me something." He said, "I used to play on Friday afternoon in the park. And my father told me You have to come home for Shabbos. You can't play all day. An hour or two before Shabbos, 2 hours before Shabbos, you got to come home. She says, how do I know it's 2 hours? He says, when you see Rav Axelrod walking to the mikveh, that's when you come home. Because like a clock, he was exactly 2 hours before Shabbos. He would go to the mikveh. I mean, he said it was the presence of a person that you saw was a different caliber. So there's a lot of interesting stories with him. Now is not the time. We're talking about, making this a little more tangible. Okay. Yeah, Avram Eliyahu, right. So basically, what I want to say is hope for mankind. And I hope before Rosh Hashanah, one of you or all of us will be in a state of a leap where we can be crying only for one reason, why we don't see Elokus Begali. And no other reason.
Amen.
Okay. So now he's going to go to another example. Remember, let's go back to make sure we have the context here. We're talking about the third interpretation in the Ayin Be'emtza, the channel in between the Yesh HaNivra and the Yesh HaMiti. Yesh HaMiti and Yesh HaNivra. The true reality, Atzmus, the created reality, and the Ayin Be'emtza. There's two, that Ayin divides into two. We learned two interpretations in that. And now the third one is that it's all in Mamala, in the Kav. So all this has been coming to explain the Kav's nature, that it creates Milo Mata, structure. So he went into a whole discussion, how is that possible? So he says, Koyecha Atzmus, Yechelus Atzmus, the capacity of Atzmus to create division, multitude, Riboy Hischalkus, diversity. And the process is the tzimtzum, because the tzimtzum is what causes the pause, or in some way conceals the Eir HaBligvul, which is Achdus, to allow for Schalkus, that the Eir should now, through this paradigm shift and leap, be structured. That's what we learned till now. Now he's going to give an example for how this, another example of how this works. It's not a simple example, so bear with me. So we're on the line, page 86. It's around 10 lines from the bottom. Again, if you want the text and you don't have the book, just go to ayinbeis.com and there you have the PDFs of these pages. The Yuvan again, this is from Ayin Beis, page 941. The Yuvan Zel Derech Moshel will understand this how the Oyer is now coming into parts in contrast to the Eir before the Tzimtzum that has no parts, that's indivisible, and Eir HaBligvul, what dominates is a oneness. Basically, it's essentially divine energy, that's all, divine consciousness, nothing else. No structure. No Chochmah, no Bina, no Kesser, no structure. So this is the contrast. He's going to give now the example. We'll understand this with an example of Shnei Bali Sichlim, two Bali Sichlim, two intelligent people, two intellectuals, if you wish. Halem dim yachad eze sugya. They're learning together some sugya, some subject. Okay. Ve'echad mehem emer, and one of them says, Svara, b'yishuv hasugya. One of them states a theory. To a yishuv means to explain, to answer, like you're learning something and you want to understand it. So one of them says a theory how to explain something they've been learning. Yishuv is usually an answer, tshuva, a question, answer. But yishuv also means to explain it, settling it, to make it settled. That's really the actual word yishuv. But it's also, yishuv means to respond to and to basically explaining the sugya. The hasvara this theory that this one of them has posited, has presented, Malaya Eir Seichel. It's filled with intelligence. Eir Seichel means the light of intelligence. In other words, it's an intelligent svara. It's not just a thought. It's a full-blown theory in explaining this sugya. Okay. V'yeshba arevus gdela. It's filled with seichel, and it has in it great sweetness. It's a very sweet. It's very arevus is sweet, but it's like very pleasant. It's like when you hear a theory that is really makes you smile, or a theory that really resonates. You know, you call it. It's like a juicy theory. Arevus literally means sweet, but sweet in theory doesn't work so well. So,
Geschmack.
great geschmack. Geschmack would be the right word. How do you translate geschmack? Pleasure, very pleasurable. Very, anybody got a word? I'm just looking for the word. Remember, it's arevus sichli. We're not talking about like a sweet candy, but sweet in the sense it's a very sweet, elegant, pleasurable geschmack idea. Okay, you get what I'm saying. Geschmack is a good word. I think we all know what geschmack is. So that's the first step in this mashal. Let's just review it. Two people are studying together, pu barei seichel, intelligent people. They're learning together a sugya, and one of them presents a theory which is filled with intelligence and is very geschmack. Arevus gedela. Good. What happens next? Omnom. Now, the drama begins. Omnom, however, keshasheni maksha al svarose. His partner, who he's learning with now, asks a question on this theory. You know, he questions it, he challenges it. The first one who posited neifel misvedase is an interesting expression. How do you translate it? It's really a combination of two meanings. One is that he doesn't abandon his theory, but his theory has been, you know, when you say a theory has been like, I would say a chink in the armor. It's been somewhat compromised. So neifel misvedase could be that the svara gets weakened, or it could be the person feels a little down because he had a theory. It seemed to be great. It was very sweet, very geschmack. But now the question in a way like puts it into a more compromised state.
Would you
I mean,
say
the word
lost?
neifel means to fall, but here means more like he's more like his spirit falls, or the svara falls.
Would you say
You
lost
wanted to say something? I
confidence?
mean, what?
Would you say lost confidence in his idea?
Yeah, you could say
No,
that.
neifel misvalosoi. It's not that he lost confidence. The svara is losing a little bit his strength.
It's right. The svara is now, it's like taking the air out of the svara. It's like somebody comes up with a great idea and then you start, in the beginning, everyone's excited and then someone starts taking the air out of it. Yeah. The svara is become weakened. But it could also mean, I think, neifel misvedase could be that his, I don't know if confidence is not, let's put it this way, it's too broad to really state whether this is the gavra or the chefza, but I would say neifel misvedase is that he's not as, you could say he's not as confident in the theory because now the theory has been weakened. But anyway, that's the point.
No, he's
Good.
not confident in the theory. Yeah. Not that
Right.
okay.
Yeah, that's what, not that he, as a person, has lost confidence. The theory has now been, let's put it this way, it's been brought down from its pedestal. You know, sometimes say, oh, what a theory, and it's been brought down a level or two. That's the key point here. It's an interesting example. Let's continue. So neifel misvedase. Umakol mokim, and nevertheless, ain't a neifel legamri. It's not like he completely abandons it, that he completely has, like the svara has been completely demolished. Shemavatul svarase legamri. It's not like he completely lost and that his svara, his theory is completely eliminated, completely nullified, completely negated. Sometimes that can happen too. You can come up with a theory and you think it's a good theory, it sounds good, then someone starts punching holes in it, and the next thing you know, the whole theory fell apart. That's not what happened here. Here, the question that the second person asked brought it down a level or a notch or two, but not that it eliminated the svara. So we still have the svara still intact, but not as powerful and not as absolute and not as strong as initially was. That's what he says so far. Okay. Because the svara, the theory that the first one posited is a good theory. The only thing is, it now has a question. It's weakened it because someone asked a question. But the theory itself is still sound and solid. But now there's a question. So now he continues. What happens next? This person who came up with this theory now exerts himself. He puts in more effort. How to answer this question. So we had a theory. They're learning a sugya. I'm just summing up the steps. They're learning a sugya. One of the partners, one of the people learning the Baal Seichel comes up with a very solid Geshmaka theory. The other one asks a question, so the theory now has been, let's put it, challenged to some extent, not eliminated. And now the one who came up with the theory is working hard now to try to find an answer to the question, to re-strengthen his theory, basically, to eliminate that challenge, essentially, to the theory, which is, by the way, this is not a bad thing here. This is talking the process of learning. This is all a healthy approach. This is what you want. You want to be able to challenge. You want them to be able to deal with the challenge. So this is so far what he said. I'm obviously very specific in spelling out the steps of the mashal because we want to understand what the mashal is coming to explain. That's why I'm being very slow and deliberate here. Okay. So how does he come? How does he find the strength? How is he able to find an answer to the question or the challenge of the other? That person who came up with the theory originally, which was then challenged and questioned, not eliminated, but questioned, how does he come to ratify it or to answer the question and reinforce his original theory? He needs now a gilui chodosh mikeach hamaskil. He needs a new revelation from the power of his conception. Meaning he can't just work with what he had. He has to dig deeper now and try to find a more innovative approach to resolve this issue that was brought up, challenging his initial theory. So he needs a gilui chodesh. Keich hamaskil is the general word for the power of conceiving. In other words, where do ideas come from? Chochma is the idea. Where does it come from? It comes from keich hamaskil. Keich hamaskil is sometimes associated with chochmas timah, just for the record. But keich hamaskil is more in the language of faculties. The faculty, the power, like the power where conscious ideas flow from. So now you need to go back, so to speak, to the engine room and come up with a seichel chadash, what he says, a gilui chadash rather, a new innovative idea in order to reinforce that original svara. So now we have 3 steps. There's the theory, there's the questioning of the theory, and now is the process of digging deeper to find a new gilui to reinforce or to explain and answer the challenge to the theory. Okay. Hainu, here's the interesting expression. Hainu ma'oseh hamokim atzma shabolei svara reshena. This gilui chadash that he needs now from the keich hamaskil has to come from the original place, ma'oseh hamokim atzma, from that very place where he first had the theory. I'm thinking what this probably means, okay, the theory came from somewhere. He was learning a sugya, his mind was working, came up with a theory, presented it, beautiful theory, geschmack and all that. It was now challenged. So he can't just say, oh, let me give you an answer. He has to go back to the place where he first conceived of the theory to get a gilui chodosh to support and answer the question that was asked.
In the koyach hamaskil.
Yeah.
The first word came from koyach hamaskil. Now he's going to that place.
Right. In other words, he can't just stay where he is and tinker with it. He has to go back to the engine room, so to speak. Yeah. V'oz, and then when he does that, hine loy zu bilvad. Now, not only, once he does that, the one who had the theory, not only Shasvara Ashniya Shabo Yitaretz Akushya, Hiktano Be'erech Hasvara Risheno, so he's saying this second bounce, this second svara that is coming to support the first svara, he says not only the second, we're talking about the first guy who said the theory, the first intelligent person, it was challenged, and now he came back with an answer that came from the same place where the first theory came. So if you compare the first theory to the second step that came after the answer, that came to answer the question, he's saying not only is the second step in this theory, the second svara that answers the question, Ashaboy Yitaretz Akushya, that the svara that comes, which the question of the second individual is answered, Hiktana be'erech hasvara sheina, not only is it less and weaker or smaller, I should say, than the first original theory, because the second svara is not the original theory, it's only coming, the cause of it is the stira, the contradiction, that the friend who asked the question contradicted and challenged his initial theory. So therefore, if you compare theory number, the first step of theory one, and the second one, which comes to answer the question that was asked, not only is it lower, the second, than the first, v'im kein hasvara chadasha, so therefore this new theory, which is the second step, eina ela pirur masvara hakademis, basvara hakademis. It's only a pirur. A pirur is a crumb. It's only a crumb because it's not the full theory. He presented a theory. His friend challenged it. He's not presenting a new theory. He's going back to that place to find an answer for this question. So what he's answering is only a crumb of the original theory. He's just supporting it. But you can't say there's two theories here. There's one theory. Now he's added a support. He's added a qualification. Maybe he's added a footnote. Something but it's only a pirur. It's only a crumb. Ba'azvar hakedemis. In the original theory.
He is qualifying the first theory. He only makes it the main thing in the first theory. Because it was a kusha, he is
right.
having...
Exactly.
The first theory is explaining some detail. One detail.
Right. That's loy zubelvad. 1 second, but there's more to it. So in addition, not only is the second theory only a crumb and a piece, just a much more detail, much less than the original theory. Ela avzu. In addition, but in addition to that, the klolos hasvara kedemis, the general initial theory, the kedemis, the first theory, the previous one, b'yishuv hasugya, in explaining the sugya that came to explain this concept, this idea, mispareres l'chalokim. It crumbs down, it breaks down into details. Lefi the kushya hasheni, I'm on page 87, because the question of the second person, mivakeya es asvara, it splits, it like pierces the initial idea, umefareres lechlokim rabim, and it causes it to break down into parts. In other words, if the second person did not challenge it, the theory would have remained a general theory. But the second person, what did he do? He challenged it. So he, in a sense, he pierced it, he opened it up. So now we're dealing with more details. So now the person who first came up with the theory has to go back to the original koyach hamaskil where the idea was conceived, and now address this detail, this crumb, so to speak, this detail. So bottom line is the second person has actually opened up the idea by challenging it. It's like breaking it apart. It's like when you hear a great idea, it's great, but then someone starts, what do they say? God is in the details. Let's break it down. You start breaking it down, and someone challenges and says, 1 second, it's a very nice idea, but what happens if this happens? And what happens if this is, and this detail and that detail? So the friend has basically, through his challenge, has split open the theory into and broken it down into many parts. What's the next word? Bikol or Vikol? I can't see the letters. It looks like it's a dalet or a vov? It's a dalet. No, it's not a dalet. Can you see the letter?
You could say Vov. וכל החלוקים הם מגופו ועצמו של הסבור.
Right. And all these details, all these parts are from the body and the essence of the original theory.
That's a beautiful marshal. That the
Yeah.
oil is becoming his chalkus.
Exactly. Exactly. That's what the Tzimtzum is going to do. Because it's already 10:36 and I must do a few things. So I'm going to stop here, top of 87 with the mushal, and we'll learn tomorrow the nimshal. I'll tell you the truth. Let me read 4 more lines, and then we'll elaborate tomorrow. If you give me, I'll just read a few more lines in the nimshal, so we don't remain hanging. Okay, so we have here a clear mushal. Ukamoy kein yuven ba da'idei sheba b'derech dilig hatzimtzum. What is the al yedei? The al yodei?
וכמו כן יובן בהאויר שעל ידי שבו בדרך
Al yedei sheba b'derech. Okay, good. Same thing we'll understand with the oyer. He's now going back to the nimshal, the moral. The oyer, pre-tzimtzum, post-tzimtzum. He says, da'idei sheba b'derech dilig hatzimtzum. The oyer that through the fact that it comes through the leap of the tzimtzum, which is the example of the challenger, the one that's challenging the original theory, so to speak. Tzimtzum is a challenge to Oyer, because Tzimtzum is a concealer. So it's a thing that's opposing the Oyer, so to speak, like the second person who's challenging the initial theory. So the original Oyer goes down, descends from its level, and comes to a state of ischalkus, because now that it's being challenged, opposed, so now it comes down into details, because that's where it's going to resolve the challenge. It has to break the challenger breaks it into details, and the response is going to be a detailed one. And this is what the tzimtzum does to the oyer. Like the second person in the example, it causes it causes the oyer akav to be in a state of distinction, details, and a state of milo mata. So basically, the oyer lifnei tzimtzum, before the tzimtzum, would be seamless divine energy. The tzimtzum, in a sense, challenges it by concealing it, and therefore, afterwards, it has to establish itself, and it comes down into details. He doesn't explain what it means that the kav is, so to speak, responding to the tzimtzum and reinforcing the original oyer, but I think we can understand and explain that, and I'll do that tomorrow. Because remember, this is all Ayin Beis, page 941 and 942. But you can think about it, but it's an interesting mashal, because of course you could ask the question, 1 second, the tzimtzum is like the chavrusa? The tzimtzum is also a divine force. So clearly this divine force is crystallizing the Eilif Nat tzimtzum. So there's a lot of aspects to this mashal that can be unpacked here. And we'll try to do that tomorrow. Okay. We'll stop here, top of page 87.